What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We're here with some more PGA DFS picks and lineup advice for DraftKings and FanDuel, this time for the Memorial Tournament. Welcome. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, and I'm joined by Niromada, our PGA DFS analyst at Occupy. Niro, what's up, man? How are you?
Good. Looking forward to the last signature event of the year, as you and I both prefer the regular field full cut events to the signature events, and this is the last one that we have, and then we've got U.S. Open in 2 weeks, so got a nice little stretch coming up here.
Absolutely. So what we're going to do in this video, for those of you who are new, we will briefly recap last week. Just something, there is something we learned last week that can remind us for building our lineups this week and in the future. We'll go ahead and look at who are the top 8 data-driven plays in our Occupy model for the Memorial. What are industry projections telling us on which golfers will be more popular in high stakes and higher dollar GPPs? We'll look at what the betting markets are telling us. Any early movers in their odds to win? Hint, there are a couple. And then we'll close out the show with some weather related notes. And at the very end, make sure you stick around. We will live build a single entry hand built GPP lineup using all the tools and discussions we had so far in the video. Now, if you see on screen here, this is a screenshot from Nero's near huge win last week, a 4K win, 7th place finish on FanDuel. And Nero won. Nice sweat, nice hit. And two, biggest takeaway for me is surprise you had Scotty Scheffler in this lineup and you actually won.
Yeah, what a shock. I had 6 entries into this contest, and I had Scotty on 2 of them. So, per my recommendations that I had last week. By the way, if you can believe this, Scotty was 80% owned in this contest. So, I was well under the field on him with my 6 entries, like I said. And it's not the irony's not lost on me that this lineup had a real sweat for the win, and it had Scotty in a week where I was very pro being under. And by the way, I got smoked on DraftKings using that same exact stay well under on Scotty strategy.
Yeah, and I will say though, in addition to Scotty obviously being 80%, you have to offset that with some lower owned golfers. We talk about that every single week in these videos. And a beautiful display of lower owned golfers around him. Rio, 13% was your next highest guy. Then you have 9% Harry Hall, you have 9% Thorbjorn Olesen, 6% golf and boyfriend Bud Cauley, and 1% Chris Goddrop, which is a great transition to what we learned from last week. Now, Nero, I would love to pick your brain on why you selected Chris Goddrop. We talked about last week driving accuracy was much more important at Colonial, and Chris Goddard known for his distance and not his accuracy off the tee. However, as it turned out, and maybe you had this fantastic foresight, but our model and betting markets alike, every week we try to predict which golfers will succeed at the course that week based on historically which characteristics have been predictive in top 10s, top 5s, and in winners. And last week, driving distance, that was the first time in the shot tracker era that driving distance was more predictive in event on who would win and who would finish high up in the tournament than driving accuracy. So Nero Goddard obviously fits that bill. I guess just talk to me really quickly about why you selected Goddard here and maybe your thoughts on why driving distance was more predictive last week than it has been historically.
Yeah. So Goddard, as you know, was probably he's in the fringe of my golfing boyfriends. He's kind of on the outer edges. So I'm always paying attention to him, and I follow his finishes, very very closely. So I had seen some movement for him in the betting markets. It wasn't like to the level of being a trifecta play, but I thought it was very interesting that he was getting movement in the betting markets. By the way, he's not someone who routinely attracts a lot of steam or gets a lot of movement in the betting markets. And I knew he was on a anti-course fit, or what we thought was an anti-course fit type of course. So I felt like I wanted to make sure I had at least one sub 5% player on this entry, considering Scotty. I had no idea, by the way, Scotty would be 80%. I was predicting, I thought he'd be more like 60 or so in this contest. So, extra glad that I did it. Obviously, I was fortunate because Goddard he played really well. But, when I was thinking about why was distance so much more important this year at Colonial, you had this is the second year off of the refurbishment that they did, and they rebuilt basically all of the greens 2 years ago. So the greens were very firm last year, and they were very firm this year. Didn't get a lot of rain. It was windy, so the course was like baked out, and it was, if I had to come up with a reason, and I don't even know that this is correct, I would say that the greens were so firm that it made a big difference to be coming in with a higher lofted club, even if you were coming in out of that Bermuda rough, that sticky Bermuda rough that's all over Colonial. So I think that might have helped the distance guys more than usual. It could also be that some of the redesign and refurbishment work that they did, they removed a few trees and things like that. It might be easier now to carry some of the dog legs than it used to be before they did the design work. But it's something definitely to keep our eyes on. And you and I discussed this, but it's a stark reminder that like we don't know everything. We don't even come close to knowing everything. So there are always good reasons to play lower owned golfers, and that is just another one of them that you just don't actually know. You think you know. We all like to think we really know that things change in real time before we're able to see them in the data. And so playing low owned golfers is a way to take advantage of that situation when it happens.
Yeah, well done there. And that's an excellent takeaway. And so let this serve as a reminder for us, you, I, all of our viewers moving forward that we don't have to determine why or even what the new characteristic may be, but it's a motivator to play lower owned golfers who may have other indicators like betting market movements, as you said with Goddard, and that is one of the reasons why, if you're not a subscriber of OccupyFantasy.com, Nero's Wednesday update, Goddard was a line mover in there. Not a trifecta play, but a line mover, so you can pick him out from that group. But especially if they're not a course fit, we know they're going to be low owned. And like you said, we try to do a great job every single week of identifying the proper course characteristics, and more often than not, we get that right. But as you said, golf happens, weather happens, course changes happens, and as a result, we see some characteristics we didn't expect at the top of some leaderboards. So now, with that said, here's why you should trust us this week on what the data is telling us at the Memorial. Now, at the Memorial, kind of similar, driving accuracy is expected to be rewarded here despite it being a longer course because of how thick the rough is. Nero, let's look at the top 8 plays in our Occupy model, what the data is telling us for this tournament. Number 1, it's not Scotty Scheffler. He's number 3. Number 2 is Colin Morikawa, who has had a lot of success at this course. But it's Sepp Straka, number 1 in the model. So maybe you could talk about those 3 guys and how you see them playing into this tournament.
Well, first of all three of them outstanding iron players. This is Jack Nicklaus design, very deep rough throughout. Like you said, it's long, but the rough is extra penal at this course. So uh, accuracy plus distance is obviously the best. That's always the best at any course. But here, the accuracy matters just a little bit more. So it's no surprise for me to see, I think most people would say Morikawa and Scheffler would be your two top iron players in the game. And Straka this year, his stats are more like one of the top iron players in the game than they were, compared to his historical stats. He's just been outstanding um, with that second shot and with his approach play. So it's not too surprising to see him near the top. It's a little surprising to see him on top of Morikawa and Scheffler, but you've got 3 in-form players with lots of high finishes this year who are outstanding approach play players, and that's why the 3 of them are sitting at the top of the model.
And a peek behind the curtain of the model, as we talk about every week for those returning viewers, we have a putting regression, putting variance tag that goes on specific players based on how they've been putting compared to their baseline averages. Straka actually gets a bump. He is expected to putt better in future events, in near future events. Whereas, and if you watched literally his first 2 holes on Thursday, Scotty Scheffler, for a change, has the negative putting variance tag. He had the positive putting variance tag for a couple weeks in the past couple of tournaments. After hitting some bombs last week, now it's flipped, and he's expected to putt a little worse based on how lucky he's been getting on some longer putts. So, Nero, that's why he's dropped to number 3, and that's why Straka's up at number 1.
Interesting. Yeah, I know the putting variance regression and is one of the things that I don't think a lot of other content providers are incorporating into their predictions. And like I was saying about Straka, I was just looking through his stats. So in 6 of his last 15 starts, he's finished in the top 10 in the field for driving accuracy, and he's plenty long enough. So you add those two things together, and you can see why that plus his iron play puts him in such a good spot. And then you add that putting regression, and you're like, oh, okay, now it makes sense why he's sitting at the top of the model.
Exactly. After the top three in our model, we have three guys who won't shock anyone based on Nero's description of needing great iron play at this course. It's Corey Connors, it's Tommy Fleetwood, and it's Aaron Rye. So, Nero, I don't know what else needs to be said about these guys, but all three terrific iron players.
If you want to fill in your bingo card, three ball striking robots right here. These are probably the three epitomes of a ball striking robot on the PGA Tour. Rye maybe a little bit less, um, but yeah, Connors and Fleetwood just machines with the irons. So no surprise to see those three sitting below the top three in the model.
Next on the list, number 7 in the model this week for the Memorial, is Daniel Berger, who may have burned a lot of people last week because he was high up in our model. But Nero, and I know you dive through the stats as well and you watched a lot of the tournament, but it seemed to me like he disappointed mostly just due to his putter. He lost the fourth most strokes in the field, lost over 2 strokes per round on the greens. It seemed fine, tee to green. So when that happens, I'm fine getting back on a guy like that. Maybe we'll get a little bit lower ownership because of last week's bust.
Yeah, he lost over 2 strokes putting across the two rounds. And again, remember before that, we've talked about Berger a number of times in these videos, but had missed a cut before that. He had to go back to the Farmers in January, and every event that he had finished before in between, he finished in the top 33, and most of those finishes were in the top 15 or top 20. So I love it when you have a guy who's playing really well, eats a lot of ownership in a week, busts. His ownership's going to drop, but really nothing happened other than he had a bad week with the putter, which by the way we know happens routinely, even with the best players in the world. So I assume his ball striking will continue to be on point, and we should get basically the same Daniel Berger that we would have gotten 2 weeks ago, but we should get him at a fraction of the ownership this week because of what happened last week.
Yeah, he was literally laughing on like the 17th or 18th green on Friday as he was trying to make the cut and just nothing was going in, lipping out putts, and he was just laughing like, this is one of those weeks that happens. And if you ever
Yep.
played golf before, it certainly happens. So, and
Yes.
rounding out the top 8 of our model this week, Nero, for the data-driven plays, it is Russell Henley. Shocker, he is pretty similar to the rest of the guys we've already mentioned on this list.
Yeah, he's very good in difficult scoring conditions, which the field is going to find this week. We've talked about Henley's irons before in these videos, and he's similar to Straka in that he's not as long as most folks, but he is very accurate, usually very accurate, we'll say, with the driver. So no surprise to see him sitting near the top of the model.
All right, let's move on and let's look at industry projections. As we do every week, we look at a very specific set of PGA DFS industry projections, not our projections, another set of industry projections that is pretty predictive in figuring out who's going to be higher owned in high dollar and smaller field GPPs where pros can play than they will be in the flagship $15, $25 GPP on each site. Nero, who are the guys this week that you may open your small field contest, $3 or more on either site, and you say, wow, these guys are higher owned than Occupy projected. They're higher owned than they are in the large field GPP. But if you listen to the segment, you wouldn't be that surprised.
Let's start with the players that we have uh, across both. And by the way, it's all of them this week, so we don't have any yet. We don't have any site-specific bumps, but we have 4 players that are going to be across both. No surprise, Scotty Scheffler. Usually, when he plays, he makes the list.
Yep.
That shouldn't be surprising to anybody. And then the other 3 are Aaron Rye, JJ Spawn, and Andrew Novak. So you don't. I don't think that there's a reason, a overarching reason for the other 3, other than just being mispriced relative to their odds to win. By the way, good example for everyone. We can go back to my FanDuel example. So in that contest that Brian showed the screenshot to, that was a $333 per entry contest. Scheffler was 80% owned in that contest. In the smaller dollar contest on FanDuel, he was between 60 and 65% owned. And
Yep.
so 80% to 60%, that 20% is usually right around the jump we get for these very best plays that you'll find when you're in higher stakes contests compared to the lower stakes.
Yeah, really good stuff. And just really quickly, Nero, we talk about Rye, we talk about Spawn, we talk about Novak. They're just clearly underpriced compared to how well they've been playing this year. And I mean, you just look at
Yeah.
someone like Novak, who's seemingly in the top five every single week at some point, and he's priced $2,000 cheaper than like Hideki, or even someone like I'm looking, even priced lower than Spieth. When obviously long-term form and long-term ceiling and who they are as golfers makes sense. But if you look at just performance over the last 6 months, it's no reason these guys should be priced cheaper.
Yeah. I mean, well, Novak's last couple starts, so 11th miscut, 17th first, that was in the team event, second and third. And he had a couple 13ths and a third back in January and February. So just kind of out of nowhere, has just been playing outstanding golf. He would be someone that if you put the blind player tag on there and you were like player A compared to player B, you would say which one would you choose, and everyone would choose player A, and that's Novak, and player B they'd rip the name off, and it was Jordan Spieth, and strictly that name recognition that keeps his ownership down. I'm not saying he's a top 10 to 20 player in the world because I don't think he is, but he's playing like it right now. And that's the main difference. That's the thing that we care about in this week to week PGA DFS that we're doing.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. All right, now you mentioned Chris Goddrop as being a market mover last week, at least at one sharp sports book. So let's move on to this week's market movers. Now, we are recording this Tuesday afternoon, so we don't have our full trifecta list yet. Trifecta play is when a golfer's odds to win improve at every single sharp sports book that we track throughout the week. But we actually do have one trifecta play already, Nero, and we have a couple others that have moved at multiple books that fit specific criteria. So walk me through what you're seeing in the betting markets as of Tuesday afternoon for the Memorial.
Yeah, so our one trifecta play that we have so far right now is Sung J M. So when we talk about Sung Jae, he might be the original ball striking robot profile. So I don't think it's super surprising to see him move. He was eighth here last year. He was 10th here 3 years ago. So he can handle the course. There's a solid course fit, and he wasn't good earlier in the year. Let's be real. Outside of his third at the Century and fourth at the Farmers, for his standards. But starting with the Masters, where he was kind of that sneaky fifth, then he was 11th at the Heritage, 33rd at the Byron Nelson, 23rd at the Truist. He missed the cut last week, or sorry, at the PGA. So, you know, he would be someone where you're looking at the long-term form and long-term fit rather than his immediate form of the last 1 to 2 weeks. But again, I think would make a good high risk play. He's not going to be super highly owned. And then we have two cheaper plays that are moving at multiple books. They're not trifecta plays yet, but that's Max Greiserman and Nick Taylor.
Interesting. Now, I
And then,
noticed, just really quickly, I noticed Nero about both of
yeah,
those guys. They're two of the lower owned golfers in the 6K range, despite getting some early line moves. So that's something we could certainly take advantage of, take in our high risk contest, especially when you compare it to some of those other guys we've mentioned that are going to be higher owned in higher dollar GPPs.
yeah, absolutely. I think that this kind of goes back to the Goddard thing. Like, you don't need to know the reason why. I don't know the reason. I don't even know the reason why. You don't know the reason why. All I know is that somebody who makes a lot of money sports betting or has a respected opinion at least by the sports books feels bullish on those two players, on Greiserman and Nick Taylor, and I'm okay to tail that at what should be very low ownership. And then the last piece, we do have three plays that are near the top of the mile that we've already talked about that have moves at multiple books, not all three, but at multiples, and that's Straka, Fleetwood, and Scheffler.
Interesting. The guys near the top of the model getting moves in the betting market. That also gives us extra confidence in those guys. So as we approach the end of the show, Nero, and we start to build a lineup here, it should build itself pretty easily given the variety of angles we have and the variety of salaries we have to use for our lineup. Before we do that, though, let's talk about showdown and weather. Have you seen anything in the weather forecast yet? Again, I know it's only Tuesday afternoon, but anything that can maybe persuade us to play one wave or the other, or even change our player profile?
Yeah, what the biggest thing I see across the first 2 days, and by the way, there is cut at this event. It's a small cut because it's a signature event, but it has that Masters-esque rule of the low 50 players and those within low 50 and ties and those within 10 shots of the leader. So there could be 10 players that get cut. There could be 20 players that get cut. Just we'll have to wait and see. So you do want to make sure that you get your teams across for the weekend. Thursday looks pretty normal. Some gusty winds around the 15 miles an hour, but 5 to 10 pretty consistently. Maybe a little bit up in the afternoon. Same thing on Friday, like winds a little bit lower in the morning, a little bit more up in the afternoons. The difference on Friday is it looks like we got some rain coming in. So I think we're going to get some storms. I'm not sure how. I don't think they're necessarily thunderstorms. It doesn't look like that in the forecast, but it looks like there's a really good shot of having uh, some light rain for most of the day on Friday. And all that's really going to do is further soften the course. The rough is going to get worse. So maybe it gives a little bit more to the distance over the accuracy. Maybe it balances those scales just a little bit, but I don't think it's going to really affect my player choices. I would just say, stay tuned to the plug and Discord channel if you're a member, because we will give further weather updates as we get closer to lock on Thursday morning.
Perfect. Sounds good. All right, now let's close it out and let's build this lineup, Nero. And then we've done this exercise the last couple of videos. The viewers have really responded well to it, so we'll continue doing it. If you do like this, give us a thumbs up. Let us know. Drop a comment. Let us know that you want to see this segment in future videos. So let us know that you do like it. So drop a comment. Let us know about that. And what we've done. And what we've done historically outside of these videos when we've hand built single entry GPP lineups, Nero, is we look at who's the cheapest guy we feel comfortable using. Are there any players that are tagged in our model or your daily plug on our site or the betting markets or whatever it may be, multiple angles to tell us that this guy is a good play. We also keep in mind ownership while we do it. Now, because this is a signature event, we typically want to play more 6K golfers because they have a higher chance of making the cut, so a little bit more of a stars and scrubs build. If we start with the very first bullet point of the cheapest guy we feel comfortable with, near the two guys we just mentioned are in the 6K range, so that adds a checkbox for the signature event lineup construction. It's Grazerman and it's Nick Taylor. I noticed Nick Taylor was a little bit higher in the model. The model was much higher on Taylor's prospects this week than it was Grazerman. I don't know if you feel otherwise, but we could play Taylor here at 6,500, or we could go double 6Ks with line movers with Taylor and Grazerman. Do you have any opinion?
Let's definitely include Taylor. My own rankings have Grazerman a little bit more, a little like Grazerman a little bit better than they like Taylor, but that's just because he's been in a little bit better form compared to Nick Taylor. But clearly, Nick Taylor has the highest career ceiling. He's got multiple victories on tour, and when Nick Taylor plays well in a given week, like he really plays well, so got a good ceiling there. I'd say let's start with Taylor, and we'll keep Grazerman in our back pocket if we get to a place where we want multiple expensive players and we're really sold on those players, then we can stick Grazerman back in there, and we know that we got another 6K player that we can use.
Okay, perfect. That sounds great. Now, I would say the next logical fit would be our early trifecta play. When there's only one or two trifecta plays, I try to get those guys in as much as possible as compared to the weeks when they're 7 or 8. Obviously, it's a lot harder to get all those guys into various lineups and equally distribute throughout your player pool. But Sungjae should be lower owned, is in that middle 8K range, should go overlooked. So let's put Sungjae in. Nero, that gives us 88.50 left per player with Nick Taylor, Sungjae M. Now is about the time where we can start looking to the top and play the do we play Scotty or do we not play Scotty game?
Yeah, let's. First question would be, how big of a contest is it that we're putting this into? If this was, under 1,000, we could just put Scotty in there and just forget about it. If it was more than 1,000, we could decide to try and build a better lineup without him. But I think the next thing I would be comfortable doing is we've got 88.50 left per player, and I look there, and right at that 8,800 mark is Seb Straka.
Yep.
And we've talked about Straka multiple times. He's the top play in the model. He's moving at multiple books. He makes a ton of sense. So I think we just lock him in. And by the way, we, math major over here, we still have basically the same amount average left for the last three players. And, from here we can decide on Scheffler. And I'll let you tell me how big of a contest you want to put this in, and that will be our Scheffler decision.
Okay, because we recommend people to play smaller contests, we'll assume this is 500 players or less. We recommend that in our ultimate guide at Occupy Fantasy. And I can't remember the commenter's name. We had a comment on last week's video, and he said, guys, let me just simplify this for you. Instead of playing the Scotty game, don't play it. You just play Scotty every time he's playing, and then you'll be fine. And that guy is probably more successful than we are in PGA DFS.
Yeah.
So let's just follow his advice, and let's play Scotty, and let's see. That leaves us 6,650 left per player. So we try to play Scheffler and Straka. It gets pretty dicey quickly. We would have to go Grazerman 67 and then
Yep.
another golfer at 66. But again, these are guys that feel fine. Stevens, Cole, Dietrich, Fox, Glover, obviously a model favorite all the time. So I really don't feel too badly about doing this. Now, obviously, Nero, the downside is, and seemingly whenever Scheffler has done well recently, none of the other top guys have done well. But we have Xander, JT, Morikawa, Cantlay, Fleetwood, Ober, Connors, a lot of guys to fill the gap in. So it feels, if there is a week to not play Scotty in this type of lineup, I think it would be this week.
Yeah, I would be so yes. First step, if you like the Scheffler build, Grazerman, and then adding Glover is probably the best play in the model. My personal one would probably be Cole, but either one of those two, I think you could stuff in there. If you took Scheffler out, again, you're back at that 8,900. You add Connors, and you still have 8750 left for your last two, and there's a lot of different things you could do. You could go up and grab Morikawa at 9900. That would leave you 7600 left. By the way, oh, hello Aaron Rye right there at 7600. Hello JJ Spawn right there at 7500. So that could definitely work. And again, this would be a non Scotty build, so maybe worried a little bit less about your ownership waterfall in this type of a build, because you're going to be unique, standing alone right there. So I think that could be a way that you could proceed on the non-Scotty portion of this.
And given the fact that we're on the fence, as we always are with Scotty, we have a detail telling us that he's due for some negative putting regression, and he's not number one in our model this week. He's very close, obviously, but number three, that alone should maybe say, all right, guys, maybe this is the week we don't play Scotty, especially when you consider the strength of the field around him, and we know he'll be higher owned than he will be in the large field GPPs. So I think that decision is made, especially Nero, when you lay it out this way. It's like, oh, let's not play him, and now we can just play these other three guys that we love this week, and all the ownership matches up perfectly. It truly does feel like the way to go.
I agree. It just feels bad when you make that decision and you keep getting punched in the face. So that part doesn't feel great. But yeah, once again, I think this type of build is a little bit stronger. But again, like we talked about last week, those other elite players, they need to deliver. They cannot finish 30th or miss the cut like so many of them did last week. Or the commenter's right from last week. It doesn't matter. You just play Scotty.
Yeah, I apologize to the commenter. We immediately just said we're not going to do your strategy, but you can comment again and let us know why we should do it. So that'll do it for this video. Daily Plug will be up Wednesday morning with Nero's top plays, his course breakdown, his lineup construction tips for the Memorial. The Occupy model is already up and running, full rankings for every player in the field with projected ownership. Our lineup builder is already up and running, where you can build up to 300 lineups using optimal lineup criteria. And our betting market update will be in the Wednesday update in the Daily Plug. And then finally, our final Trifecta plays will be posted in Discord Wednesday evening. You saw Nero's 4K win earlier. If you want to read more or listen more about how Nero is successful in DFS, PGA DFS especially, I'll link a video right here. It will pop up on screen now, and you'll see an interview that we did with him with one of his six-figure wins. So go check that out after you watch this video. So for Nero, I'm Brian. Thanks everyone for listening. We appreciate you. Good luck and enjoy the Memorial.